Good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Dana.
I am curious to talk to you today because I have known you for a really long time, but I don't think we've really sat down and talked about your insight when it comes to reclaiming time, your life as a professional organizer, and I think it's a good opportunity to share with our listeners some tips and the soulful expression of reclaiming time. And I'm curious, how did you begin on this process? I know ages ago, we're laughing because my dog Ozzy is trying to jump on Elaine right
Ozzy
now.
really likes me.
He loves you.
Hi, Oz.
He is our on-site assistant. But you used to be in corporate and you left that and ended up becoming a professional organizer. And I think that's where all of this began for you. And can you begin to tell us about that journey that you took that led you down this path?
Well, Dana, we talked about the word well before we started. So, Dana, it has been an interesting journey for me and time. Mm-hmm. And when people look at me now, they think, wow, she's really got it together. And, she's pretty, firm about the time she gives away or the time that she offers to people. But it wasn't always that way. So if you go way, way back, I was a month late, mm-hmm. like arriving on the planet.
Yeah.
And Mom said, is this kid ever going to come out of me? And she said when I was born, I shed like a lizard. Because when babies are really overdue, like their skin peels off. And so Mom tells that story. And she said, you came into this planet late and you were just... And it's interesting how beliefs happen, right? Mm-hmm. So I came into this planet late. When I was a teenager, Mom said, I swear you would sit up the road and you would wait until 10 after 10 if your curfew was 10, just so that you could arrive late. And so I had this pattern my entire life, like up until... I guess when I started, not even when I started working, because I think about my corporate life, I would just kind of saunter into work. Oh dear, I'm 5 minutes late. And my husband and I were called the tardy twins. And so we were so habitually late that people bought us clocks for our birthday. Like we got, or not birthday, for our wedding. We got anniversary clocks. We got, those nice ones with the globes on the top. Yes. We got wall clocks. People were telling us something.
Be on time.
So the tardy twins were never on time. And so we were in our 20s, and from what looking back now, I think, wow, you two were highly disrespectful to everybody around you. And it wasn't until I left corporate world, and that's a whole other story, because I didn't leave in a great way. I left in a fiery crash, my body and mind took me out. But what had happened was we had a baby, and a baby who was not a happy baby. This baby cried from the time he came out of me. And it was not a great experience. And he was our second child. So our first child was like, she never did anything. I was working on my Canadian securities course while I was home on maternity leave with her, because that's how fantastic a baby she was. And then we had this baby from hell who he didn't sleep, he cried all the time, and so hence my departure from my corporate job at a bank. And we realized that through time, this child had autism. He had a form of autism. Back then it was diagnosed as Asperger's, now it's autism. And so we had to change our life for him. We had to change everything. We had to change how we showed up, when we showed up, how we prepared to go anywhere. That experience of him coming into our world made us change, and he has been the best teacher that we could have ever had. And because of that, I have been able to help thousands of other people because he's been such a gift.
And so how did that lead you then down this path? Because you say you came into the world late, and I'm going to ask you this later in the episode, because you asked me last week about who was I when I was 12, because it feels like you have this relationship with time that has shifted. But you eventually started helping people with respect to relationship to their time, and you talk a lot about reclaiming time. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Like how did you help people? How did that begin?
Well, so here I am, a stay-at-home mom with two children, and then we thought we'd add a third just for fun. So so here we are with three children, and I'm a total type A personality. Like, I love to create, I love to start things, and here I was at home with three kids, and I was dying. Like, I love my kids, love my family, but there was a part of me that wasn't being filled up, and so I happened to be on the internet, and I'm like, well, what am I good at? Like, other than, being a mom. And, found organizing. So in all my weird things with time, the thing that I've always been is organized. Like, love organizing spaces. When I was a kid, my bedroom, like, I could figure out like 100 different ways to organize the things in my bedroom. My Barbie house, it was like, my best day was when I could take my Barbie house and rearrange it.
Clean your Barbie house. House clean your...
And rearrange furniture for maximum space usage.
I think there was a professional organizer in the making at that time.
Well, I know there was. So I've always been that way with stuff, but time wasn't always good for me. So I started, looking online, found something, and at the beginning I had an amazing business partner, and her and I started this together. And if it wasn't for her, I would have never had, I guess, and it's better together, right? So you and I doing this podcast, it took two of us together to get me over the threshold and through that new journey as an entrepreneur and hanging a shingle out as a professional organizer. So I went to a conference in 2004 in Toronto, my first professional organizing conference. And so I'm sitting there in this room and I have goosebumps as I'm telling you, and with all these people, I'm like, oh, look at how amazing they are. And Krista Green got up in front of the room. She was our keynote speaker, and Krista stood there, and she had a label maker in her hand, and she raised it above her head, and I have goosebumps, and she had, "Here we are together, geeks with label makers." And I went, "I'm home, I found my tribe."
It's like the heavens open up, you can hear the angels singing as she raised the label maker over her head.
Exactly, Dana.
Yeah.
And then I went to a conference a few years later in the United States, and Stanley Robertson, who was the president at the time, she got up and did a speech, and she said, "So here we all are," and I think it might have been, I don't know, Boston or something, and she said, "Please raise your hand if you've already rearranged the furniture in your hotel room."
You can't help yourself.
We can't. Right? It's just, so you go into a hotel room and you're like, no, the lamp's in the wrong place because I need to move the chair so I can read better. So it's just this thing. Our brains see space. But there's this other part of our life, to go back to the reclaiming time, and it's time. And so time is this thing that, people, you can't manage it. And I teach people that, first thing in the course I say, like, you are going to learn by the end of today that you cannot manage time. And it's one of the things at the end. So what can't you manage in time? Because you can't. So the first few minutes that you've listened to this podcast, you couldn't manage that. You can't get it back. So what I teach people is how to reclaim time, how to look at time and the 168 hours, time blocks that you have every week. And I treat those like $168 million.
Right.
Who am I willing
Good
to
analogy.
Who am I willing to give one of those up to? And so when I started looking at, my son and being an entrepreneur, and, and I'm over 50 now, and I thought, like, life is short and there is so much I want to do.
Right.
And people have asked me to help them. So over the years, I've developed several workshops. I've done one-on-one coaching with people. I've gone into people's homes and offices and helped them, to reclaim their space, but also to reclaim their time, so that they can do what matters, so that they can live their life by design, not by default.
Right. Yeah, that's a great statement. Not by design, or not by default. Yeah.
By design. Right. Yeah. And so
it's I'm hearing intention in there.
Oh.
By design, it's with intention and purpose. And Elaine, what I hear a lot of, and I've been hired to speak on these topics, work-life balance. Everybody wants to talk about work-life balance. They say, please help me find work-life balance. And I say there is no such thing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, sister.
Hallelujah. There's
A little high five,
Yeah.
because there isn't.
There isn't. So then, from your perspective, as someone who's spent a lot of time teaching people how to manage their time or to
Not
use it, not manage
use it,
but
right.
to how are you going to spend it wisely? What is reclaiming time to you? Like when you explain that to someone and they go, "What does that mean? Like, how do I get my time back? You know, once it's gone." So, what is that referring to when you call reclaiming your time?
What I think is happening right now, Dana, is there is a huge shift on this planet. People are, with social media and our devices that we carry with us constantly, we are on 24/7, right? And so how do we get that back? Right? And so to reclaim the time, we have to put some boundaries around the access that they have to us. And it's simple but not easy.
Right. Because I'm hearing you say basically saying no to things in there, right?
You are absolutely saying no. And so how do you say no to your boss?
Right. Right.
How do you say no to your
He
mother?
or she doesn't like
right.
that.
How do you say no to your mother? How do you say no to your siblings? How do you say no to your friends? But what you're doing is when you decide what's important to you, what you're doing is you're saying yes to you. Because by saying yes to everybody else, there's that life by default. You are giving everybody else permission on what they think is most important for your time.
Right. And so how do you learn to say yes and no to something in order, like it's confusing, right? People think, well, how am I supposed to, everything's important. All the balls are in the air.
Well, everything is important, Dana, if you don't have a point of focus. And so it's not a time problem, it's a focus problem. So in my workshop, the first exercise I take the participants through is a values exercise.
Yes, values, just speak the language.
Yeah, I know. So, and Dana, here's the thing. When I do the workshops, I always do a raise of hands. Who in this room has done a values exercise in the past? And traditionally, probably 25%. So 75% of my audiences have never done a values exercise. So they have no North Star, no point of focus. They are living by default. And so, and the 25% that do, they're sitting there nodding their heads going, oh, now they're seeing a bridge between values and time.
Yeah. Because where would you learn that? Nobody talks about values. We talk about that we value things. Or value stuff. We use that where we throw it around, but the kinds of values that you and I speak about are exactly what you're saying is your North Star. I call it your GPS, right? So when you know what your values are, it's easy to match things that come up in your life and go, oh, no, that's not a match. I said I value freedom, and if I take that on, I'm not going to feel very free. So it's really becoming, it's a knowing who am I? And values to me are really, who am I? And for me, I talk about, my top 4 is, connection, contribution, and comedy. And after writing my book, I added creativity. I didn't realize that was such a
Thank you for
powerful
adding
force.
creativity, Dana, because
Right.
I think that's where we miss out because our schedules are so busy, busy, they miss out on the creativity part.
Right.
There's no white space to allow spirit in, to bring in all the beautiful things that you were brought here to do.
Right. Well, all the people who are listening go, well, I'm not creative.
Oh, yes, you are, soul sisters listening and soul brothers. You were
Everyone
born
is, yeah.
creative. Think back to when you were a child and how creative you were. You were playing outside, you were using your imagination. Everybody is creative. We come here creative, and somewhere, we talked about that in another episode, somewhere after the age of 12, it gets conditioned out of us that we are not creative. So I like to teach adults I like to remind them. So in the workshops, they come and they sit down at the tables, and I have pencil crayons,
Right.
and I have markers. I have all kinds of colorful things. The workshop handouts are colorful because I want them to connect back to their childhood creativity, because the exercises that we do in this workshop are not your traditional time management. There are, and here's a statistic, there are there are tens of thousands of time management resources on Amazon.com. Go look it up.
Yeah.
They are not solving the problem. What they are trying to do is to help you do more.
Yeah.
Get better.
Do more with less.
Right. Do more with less. Be faster.
What about the stuff that matters to you?
Right.
Right? Because sometimes we're doing stuff we don't want to do.
but there's very few books on that list of tens of thousands that are actually teaching you how to figure out what is important to you, and that's what you put in your calendar. So I'm reading Essentialism right now by Greg, and I don't know how to pronounce his last, McEwen. And you know what? Thank you, Greg, because you are giving language to what we are struggling with right now. It is essentialism. What is essential? So back to how I get people started. How do we prime the well, right? How do we get people thinking about how to focus your time? And so this values exercise. So, I have a list of like 100 values here. And what I do is I get people to pick their 5 top values. And that's hard. That is hard. Then I get them to take that and boil it down to 1. That is challenging. And people are like, oh, no, not one. But you know what? You follow, there's one North Star. When you're on a GPS, when you're in your car and you put the coordinates in the GPS, what would happen if you put 3 coordinates in at the same time? Your GPS would be like, take the next legal left U-turn.
Yeah,
I don't know where I'm going.
Bertha would be, we call mine Bertha. Please take the next, yeah, exactly.
Right, so Bertha would be, so why do we think we're different? So if we have one North Star, and we follow that, and it becomes a filter.
So you're saying that, like, you take a filter. So if you're trying to plan your week or your
life, this is life by design.
Yeah.
So like you, Dana, my value is freedom, and so that goes back to my story about Mom and I, and me sitting up the road waiting till 10 after 10.
Yes.
So
not coming home as a teenager.
Right. Because I didn't want somebody to put boundaries around you.
She was stealing your freedom.
She was stealing my freedom. And my mom and I,
so you rebelled.
We have great conversations about that now. Because Mom was 21 when she had me, and she always says, I grew up raising you. You taught me so much. So when my children came around, I went, you know what? I have a son who's a Taurus, just like me. So all 3 of my children they're free birds. So I never gave them a curfew. I said, if you're not going to be home, call me, right? But I'm one of these moms that I can go to bed at night while my kids are around.
You were applying your values to them. Because you felt freedom. You knew what that meant, right. So that you were extending that really. I felt like you were giving them that leeway where, they might have said, hey, maybe I need more structure. I don't know any teenager that...
So our middle guy, right? Yeah. So he needed a little more structure. So he would say, "What time would you like me home?" "Oh, how about 11?" Great. And so but if he got home at 11:30, I wouldn't be standing at the door having a fit. I couldn't care less. As long as I know where they are and they're safe, right? So I'm, not trying. Our goal was to not be helicopter parents or lawnmower parents.
Right. Right.
So the values exercise. Once you do the values exercise, and so think of a filter, like a nice a
funnel.
A funnel. Thank you. So think of a funnel, and so all the things in your world are coming into the funnel, right? And then there's that little tiny spout thing at the bottom, and so
not much can get through that.
Your value is sitting right there, and it has to pass through your value to come out of that. And go into your calendar.
Right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that people go into their office today and tell their boss no. What I'm suggesting is that you start with the things that you have more control over.
Such as? Is
there
an example?
Family and friends.
Right.
Your personal time.
So start with them.
Start with, take your calendar, your 168 hours. Take those 168 hours. And then, okay, I'm time blocking here's my work hours, right? And it's different if you're an entrepreneur. You can say no to your clients. Maybe there's clients you need to say no to make space for clients who really resonate with you. But here's your space that you really that you may not have control over. Then you have all that space around. So if you have 168 hours in the week and you work a 40-hour week, that leaves you 128 hours every week that you get to decide what goes in your calendar.
Right. Someone said to me once, I can tell a lot about a person by how they spend their time and their money. What things in their wallet and their calendar.
Right.
Basically. So, and you have to get super focused on what it is, what matters to you, and how do you want to spend that time. Like it becomes, and it can be a little overwhelming when you first start that, because when you're talking about saying no, if you've never said no to people and you start saying no, people are going to go, what?
Well, so here's a little tip. Here's one of my tips. It's called the pregnant pause. So I suggest to people to say, oh, I don't have my calendar with me right now. So that request that you have of me,
Right.
I'm going to have to get back to you on that. So what it does is if you are having a hard time saying no in the moment, it gives you space to go back and to think about if that particular
Run it through
request,
your funnel.
run it through your funnel. And so run it through your funnel and then get back to them and say, you know what? Thank you. Great opportunity. Great idea. But no.
But no, thank you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as saying no. Because what we want to say is no. And here's because.
Yeah.
And then you're writing this essay about why you're saying no. But as Oprah said, because we need to, Oprah is, she's like, Oprah.
We need a bobblehead.
We need our bobblehead Oprah. Is that no is a complete sentence.
Yes.
And so it has taken me years to do this, right? And so in this past year, I've had lots of opportunities to say no.
Right.
Because they didn't fit through my filter. Now, the Elaine of years ago, I would have said yes to all that, right? To the detriment of myself. Is this in my highest good?
Right.
And not every opportunity is a good opportunity, and not every opportunity is in your highest good opportunity.
And even if it sounds like it is.
Oh, they all sound like
Yeah,
great.
they all sound great. It's like,
Right, they all sound fantastic. And yes, from the other person's perspective, this is life by default. From their perspective, that's what they think you, and I'm gonna use the word should.
Right.
Right? But I don't should on anybody. When I ask somebody something, it's a hard yes or it's a hard no.
Yeah.
And if people say no to me, I respect that. Because they have checked in and it doesn't fit in with them.
Yeah, and I think that's an important takeaway is that people need to learn to check in with themselves more. That you need to learn to trust yourself and what you think matters. Right?
But if you don't have your North Star, Dana, how are you ever? So you are making decisions by default every day.
Right.
You're going, do I have to? What you're looking at is, do I have time in my calendar? Instead of, is this a priority?
Right.
A priority to me?
Right. Yeah, and you're speaking my language when it comes to values. I mean, that's a huge part of coaching and helping people through their lives is that people feel like they're picked apart and they feel like they're being pulled in so many different directions. And that's why we have this topic come up all the time. We want to talk about work-life balance. And it's not so much what you're doing. Everybody wants to figure out who you're doing. It's checking in with who you're being. So when I talk about connection, contribution, and comedy, for me, I route things through my filter like that. So I use comedy, they're all C's. I just turn them all into C's to make it easy to remember.
It sounds nice.
Sounds great. I think in English language it's called cacophony or something.
Cacophony, which also starts with a C. Or is that a K?
No,
Is
it's
that
a C.
It's a C. Okay.
But it's this measure. So for example, what we talked about, doing this podcast, I would think about if I did it by myself, how much fun would I have? Not that much fun.
No, because you'd be staring at the blank
I'd be
wall
staring at my fireplace
behind
there.
me.
But doing it with somebody else, I had to figure out how would that honor my value. And I love that word honor. How do I honor my value? And I honor my value of fun. It's like by doing it with somebody else. There's some energy. It comes alive, right? So I think when people begin to know and understand values, it begins to be a game changer. Right, and I heard Tony Robbins talk about values before, and I thought it was even took it another step further because there's a difference between means values and ends values. And means values are the ones that get you to where you're going, and ends values are things like, people might say, I value my car, my house, my family. And
stuff.
Stuff.
Well, stuff,
and more of the physical, material things, and that's fine. I'm not going to take that away from anybody. But it's the means values, the connection, contribution, comedy, adventure, those words that describe who am I, and then that is what makes life really rich. When you start living a life according to your values, like, hello.
Oh, hello. So if you follow me on social media anywhere, people are always stopping me and saying, oh my gosh, what's your next adventure? What are you doing?
Yes.
Because my life looks like an adventure.
Yes, yeah.
I work. I actually work.
Facebook says you adventure.
Facebook says adventure because that's how it shows up.
Yeah.
So this is what
But you will find an adventure in anything.
Oh,
right?
Yes.
Yes.
And
I mean, even this is an adventure.
Well, because I have put those things through the filter and they've matched my values and they make it through. There's a few things every once in a while that don't, and it's fantastic when that happens because it happens for me, not to me.
Right. Knocks you out of your alignment with your
It
highest
knocks me out.
self.
And then I have to go back and say, hey, how did it get through? What was it? Why was it there to teach me? Right? What happened? And so it's a bit of a course correction.
Right.
So back to your work-life balance. So I heard this term or saw it on Instagram, work-life presence. So when I filter all the things in my life through my values, I am able to be fully present. Now, easier said than done. And part of this for me this year specifically is my device, my phone. I have been practicing keeping my phone away from conversations.
Right.
When I'm with people, it's in my purse, or when I'm home, it's not in the room that I'm with other people.
Right.
Because I read that when a phone is on a table, it will inhibit the conversation happening. Because people are aware that the person that is with you is not 100% present. They are waiting for somebody else to call.
They're waiting for the next moment.
They're
already
waiting
in the other
right.
moment.
So that is something that I am practicing this year.
Yeah.
Is that, so my husband and I were out for dinner last night, so we're doing Valentine's Day a week early because I'm off to my next adventure.
Right.
Tomorrow I'm off to Vancouver to work on a film pilot, a TV pilot. So when we were at dinner last night, it's like phones were off the table. Right? And I'm looking around the restaurant, right? And so I see a guy sitting by himself eating, and he has his phone out, right? Because he's, by himself. But, and there were some people working. But I'm noticing more people are not putting their phone out, right? And so I'm challenging the listeners today and the viewers, right? How am I showing up? Am I being present? Or am I thinking about what's on that phone? Because every time you pick up a phone and you're with somebody, you're telling the person that you're with that they're less important than what you just did.
Yeah.
That's
It's
hard.
Such a distraction.
Hard. And
It's
then when you're
hard.
home with your family, because everybody's sitting on the couch doing the thing. And, as your kids grow up, like, they're not around a lot. And when you're with them, you want to be present.
Use all of that time. Yeah. What are some tips that you can give people who, the values one is a huge one.
That's the foundation, Dana.
That's the foundation.
If that's the only thing that people get out of my workshops or this conversation, that's the
biggest one.
That is the game changer.
But for people who are listening and they're saying, but what about work-life balance? But if they wanted to, because in your workshop you do talk about how people can reclaim it and some of the tips.
Yes.
What are what is one thing that people can begin to change today? That helps them reclaim their time or feel like a little more sane.
From a work perspective, so let's do a couple.
Yeah.
So from a work perspective, let's look at the last 30 minutes of the day. So this was a concept that I taught, that I started, I think I read years ago, and I thought, okay, I'm going to incorporate that into my workshops and see how it goes. So I was doing a lot of workshops at Irving Oil at the time, and I challenged one of the executives. I said, so, what's your best 30 minutes of the day? And he goes, oh, that's the first 30 minutes. I get in the office at 6, and, I'm doing all this work, and I said, how's that going? He goes, well, it's interesting, because he said, now that I'm coming in at 6, everybody else started coming in at 6, right? Because there's this whole philosophy that if the boss is there, then we all need to be there.
100%. That's a whole other topic. That's right in my wheelhouse.
Right. So we'll add that for a future show.
Yeah.
So what happened was he wasn't getting everything done that he wanted to get done because everybody started coming in. I said, I'm going to challenge you to use the last 30 minutes of the day. And he goes, oh, okay. And I said, here's why. Because what are most people doing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? Not much. You're thinking about what you're having for supper, what's going on that night, yada, yada, yada. So between 4 and 5, it's sort of this there's like a mental Jenga happening, right? So what if you took those last 30 minutes of the day and you looked through all the papers on your desk, you took a scan through your emails, you looked at your phone, and then you looked at your appointments for tomorrow, and you took that 30 minutes and you organized your day. And then in that 30 minutes, you would take the top 5 things that you would like to get done the next day. could be make a phone call, like itemize them,
prepare.
Write them down on, a little piece of paper. You've got your recipe cards, whatever it is, sticky notes.
Mm-hmm.
So write the top 5 things that you want to get done the next day. So the first time I said that in one of the exercise or one of the workshops, people came back to me and said, I slept better last night.
Mm.
Because everything that I used to think about, that was the mental Jenga, wasn't happening.
Keep you up all night because you didn't deal with it.
So they were sleeping better.
Mm.
So then you come in the morning and you are hitting the ground running because you know what you're doing first thing. Guess what everybody else is doing first thing in the morning at work?
We're checking emails.
They're trying to figure out what they're doing that day.
Create a plan.
Right. You've already created the plan.
Yeah. Set yourself up for
It.
success.
So that last 30 minutes of the day is critical. Then you do that again at home.
Yeah.
So last night, knowing that we're recording our podcast today, I know you were preparing. You got the camera, you got the chairs ready. I had my bag packed with, what are my notes? What do I need to have? What's my wardrobe? Like, what are all the decisions that I can make tonight that I don't have to make tomorrow morning?
Mm.
And that is a game changer.
Oh, for sure. And because work is always in the preparation. Because that's all the hardest part. Once say when we do this podcast or doing anything, or if I go take the stage to do a talk, the work is already done. Then you can just show up and shine.
You show
and so
up.
I think that's such a huge, that's a great tip.
And that is work-life presence. So when you show up and shine, you are fully present.
Oh, for sure.
You are
and
not
you're not doing the, taking all these mental cigarette breaks because you have to stop and think about what you're doing. And
there's our first snort of the day.
But we get so sidetracked because there's lack of focus. So I think that's a huge one. Taking the 30 minutes at the end of the day is a great tip.
And so that leads me back to, it's not a time problem, it is a focus problem. And so by focusing on the next priority, not priorities. So in this book, Essentialism, Greg talks about how priority was a singular word up until the 1900s when it became priorities. And so you as a human being you have your North Star, and I can only physically do one thing at a time because we know that multitasking doesn't work ever. One thing at a time. So what is your next priority? And so if all else fails and you are doing the whirling dervish and you're spinning around, you need to find your North Star, and what is that one thing you need to do next? The next breadcrumb.
Last question for you. How does reclaiming time, this idea of minimalism and just all of that around time, how does that help us connect more soulfully to ourselves?
So, Dana, I can just feel this bubble of energy around us right now. When I am living my highest self, when I am living my values, I can be fully present with people. And when you are fully present with people, they can feel your soul.
It's so true. People can feel that, the authentic you.
Right. The soul connection. And I have goosebumps. So when I'm at the grocery store, I'm standing there and I'm looking at the cashier and I'm looking at the people behind me, and people will tell me the darndest things in lineups because they know you are soul present.
100%.
People will tell you everything.
In all 5.
I have a huge vault, right?
Yeah.
So it comes in this vault, right? And it goes and then whatever story they needed to tell me, then it just leaves, right?
Right.
But people need to connect. And so when you reclaim your time, you have the space, the soulful space to be fully present.
And here to just even connect with themselves. That's what you're ultimately doing.
Yep.
I'm going to end with a quote from, that's actually yours, or from your workshop.
It might not be my quote.
I didn't write down who's from. I'm sure it was from your workshop. I thought, okay, this just seemed like a good way to end. And because you were talking about focus, and it says discipline has within it the potential for creating future miracles. And I think that's a good place to end.
Thank you, Dana. That was a fabulous conversation.
Thank you, Elaine. we go.